want you to just try to imagine now a world where every transaction is permanently secure. Fraud becomes nearly impossible, and governments and business can be held transparently accountable, not like decades from now, but starting today. Our guest, David Hartley, says that this world is within our reach, thanks to something that's probably long overdue, an upgrade to accounting, and that blockchain is the key to doing that. He's a tech entrepreneur and a pioneer and who's chosen the Caribbean to launch that global mission. And he's the CEO of Pacio. Now, how do you say that? I think I've heard Ken say it a different way. Is it Pacio?
We normally say Pacio with a hard C.
Pacio.
Yes. Because the name is a bit of a take on Pacioli, Friar Pacioli, the guy who documented double entry accounting as a system in the 15th century. So,
Okay.
yes.
I had no idea that was part of the background. So Pacio, it's Saint Lucian based. But David, Saint Lucian based, but you're not from these parts. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you got into the tech space and why Saint Lucia?
It's a bit of a long story, so I'll have to try to compress it. But I started my professional life as a civil engineer, and I ended up working in Namibia, in Africa, which is where I did my first heavy-duty computing with mathematical models of a river basin. On my return to Australia, after working as an engineer for a while and being involved with computing, I looked around for a business opportunity, and after trying to sell some software to engineers, decided that accountants were a better bet. And knowing absolutely nothing about accounting at the time. And the company that came out of that ended up operating in 15 countries around the world and was credited with converting the accounting profession from accounting machines to computers. And I was given the honorary title of the father of client accounting. That's the Australian and British term for what professional accountants do in producing financial statements for their business customers. And I was even granted honorary membership of the Australian Institute of Accountants. Then after that lot, we became the biggest customer in the world for Wang Computer at the time and launched Wang all over the world. And we decided in our hubris that we could do better ourselves. It's a state government guarantee. And at one point when we were booming, struggling to meet the orders, the receiver walked in the door. What the hell are you doing here? And turned out that the Queensland government had appointed the receiver under a technicality. We were booming, not in trouble, but the problem was too many orders, not too few. And I was subsequently told by the Federal Minister of Finance that I had failed to put the right amount of money in a brown paper bag for the state government's Premier's Foundation. And so that cost me millions of dollars and cost Australia billions. So that was a disaster from corruption. You might say, was I mad enough to get married 4 times? So yes, there's some madness in the beast. But my 4th wife, who was African by birth, born in Nigeria, but of Polish parents, so she was a white African, she got primary progressive multiple sclerosis. And she, ahead of the time, worked out that vitamin D from the sun and a hotter, drier climate would help her. And in that, she was correct. And so we sold up everything that we had in the UK and moved to Antigua. And that's how I ended up in the Caribbean. I'd never been in the Caribbean before. So my first sight of it was courtesy of my wife with primary progressive multiple sclerosis. And she did, in fact, beat the MS quite remarkably. People thought it was incurable, could not be done, but she did so. She was very persistent and accomplished it. But she'd be out in the sun at midday for an hour naked getting her D. And taking supplements as well. So she got very high D levels. And in fact, that did help her beat the MS. But unfortunately, she did not beat her addiction to sugar, which is part of my carry on here with people about health in the Caribbean, people eating too much sugar. It killed my wife. She ended up with cervical cancer from sugar. So she ended up dying in 2015 in Antigua. But by this time, I was gotten to love the Caribbean, the people, the climate. It's never hot and it's never cold here. Aleutians laugh when I say it's never hot. They don't accept it, but I laugh because it's never hot here. 20, 32, 33 maximum. That's not hot. Outback Australia, 50. That's a bit hot.
Sure.
So I'm say never hot here, never cold. A few hurricanes pass by, but otherwise a great place to live. But as for business, so having decided that there was opportunity to redo or rework double entry accounting that facilitates, and then I came to by the time I got through to 1916, the thought was there that double entry accounting, as we have known it for 500 years, needed revision. And that was when blockchain was beginning to take off. And so I came up with the idea of triple entry accounting via blockchain. Double entry accounting has been around for a long time, and virtually every business and every government in the world uses it.
What is it? What is the double entry part of that?
Oh, okay. It is double because the innovation in the 15th century by the Italian bookkeepers that was documented by Friar Pacioli was to help reduce errors by posting anything twice. Everything you posted into your books would have to be posted twice, once as a debit and once as a credit, so that the debits and the credits should always add up. And that's where balancing the books came from, that your entries should sum. So when you made a sale, there was a credit for the sale, and there was a debit to your accounts receivable or to your cash, so that there was always the two entries for everything. So that's where double entry accounting came from. Prior to that, accounting was single entry, like most people might do at home with their personal records of their expenses, and a cash book that many people keep is a single entry accounting process. If you spend at Massey, you put the entry in your cash book for how much you spent. It's one entry. And
Yes.
you have a running balance which corresponds with your bank balance. So that was how things used to be before double entry accounting in the 15th century. And double entry accounting did reduce errors. It's very easy to make errors with single entry accounting, as we have all probably experienced. So double entry accounting reduced that error rate and was a part of the successful growth of international business in the 500 years since, including for the bad as well as the good. The slave trade was documented with double entry accounting. But the double entry accounting doesn't or isn't good about preventing fraud, in that people can cook the books by altering the entries. And in one business, your records are yours alone. You interact with other people you buy from, people you sell to, but you don't record their side of the transaction. You record your side of the transaction. So if you have a crooked accountant, a crooked financial controller, or whoever, they can fiddle it.
David, help me understand a little bit, though. I mean, about the impact of this fraud that you're talking about. You mentioned in the case of your business, your previous one, that cost you millions and the public billions of dollars, some sort of fraudulent activities. But globally speaking, what is the impact of fraud on our financial systems, and how does it impact just the general public?
The impact is huge. It's of the order of the US economy. Our estimate for this year is $29 trillion. The biggest single item is cybercrime, around 10.5 trillion, and then 5 trillion in corruption and fraud of various types. Now, this is involving only the external fraud. It doesn't even cover internal fraud, which we can't measure very well. But to get a handle on, we've listed it all out in the Pacio business plan, and it adds up to $29 trillion this year. So it's absolutely huge. And when you look at the total world GDP is of the order of 110 trillion, it's a very big proportion of world GDP. And most people don't realize it's anything near as big as it is, because people who are perpetuating it, of course, hide it. They don't want people to know. And that's one of our problems, one of our difficulties in introducing this. We have a huge battle because the people who are profiting from corruption don't want triple entry accounting. And the people who are profiting in many cases are the powerful. We're seeing it, unfortunately, right now in the United States. The most powerful people in the United States are profiting hugely from corruption. So we're taking on the powerful in trying to bring this under control. The impact on people is enormous. This is stealing from the people of the world. It is the part of the reason why there are still so many people in poverty. It's part of the reason why.
And is that the connection you make between that loss of that money and things like basic income, making universal basic income a possibility? Is that the connection with?
Now, the wealth is there in the world and will be increasing from AI and robotics and these things to generate enormous wealth. And as we know, the income distribution currently is totally skewed. The 1% holds an inordinate amount versus the 99%, which should not be. But the problem is in terms of introducing UBI systems, universal basic income systems, which have been tried in some places in the world, and usually with success. I mean, people, the right-wingers, the non-liberal people will say, oh, if you give people money for doing nothing, they'll sit on their ass and smoke dope and do nothing. It is just not how it works. People, if they have their survival covered, will then be more creative and have less stress. They will actually, some will be more creative in art and music and so on for the good of humanity. Others will do more in business and working when their basics are covered. The problem with UBI systems is in transferring money from those areas where there is money to the general populace is the danger of fraud. People will rort the system, like the rorting that went on in COVID times with the various schemes around the world to help people through COVID. There was hundreds of millions of fraud involved. So without triple entry accounting to control the fraud, UBI will never happen. And that means we continue this situation of extremely skewed income and wealth. And now I saw a report a couple of days ago from a person in Saint Lucia that said that poverty wasn't the primary cause of crime in Saint Lucia, though it was a factor. Now, I think that poverty is, in fact, a big factor in crime. Now, certainly there are other factors, the breakdown of families and the like that he talked about. But if there is any hope of reducing crime, then any hope of reducing poverty and thus crime, then UBI or the equivalent is needed. Plus, we need to make sure that there is no corruption in the system. So we've got to be crime eradicated at the top in terms of corruption, and to help at the bottom with UBI, universal basic income. Now, I suffered from corruption in Australia, and the corruption rankings in the world is one of the better ones, but yet I suffered from it there. Now, I'm not pretending that there isn't corruption in the Caribbean. We know that there is, sadly. And it is, as I mentioned earlier, one of the difficulties of getting backing or getting support to get triple entry accounting underway, because the people who are benefiting from the corruption and crime don't want it.
Let's help me to understand. So I'm sold on wanting less corruption and to free up some more of that trillions of dollars so they can benefit the folks that really should be benefiting, the public and so forth. But how does this third entry help to address that now?
Right.
And
Yes.
maybe just for, I think a lot of people on the call here understand what blockchain is roughly, but maybe we can just also say a little bit of what that blockchain and how that fits into it, and how does that third entry in blockchain help to address this?
Blockchain is a technology, and we need to think of blockchain in terms of it as a technology, not as crypto. People get off track by equating blockchain with crypto. Now, certainly the Bitcoin white paper, which was the start of blockchain technology in many ways, did talk about triple entry accounting, but the two are separate. And so it is blockchain technology which provides the opportunity to change everything. It's the first time in human history, all the way back to records on stone, that we can have an immutable record, something that once created cannot be changed. Every previous record-keeping system, right up to today on computer systems, can be changed after the event, on databases, on paper records, on whatever records. So for the first time ever in human history, blockchain technology allowed us to have a record that couldn't be changed afterwards. And that's what makes it powerful for triple entry accounting. And the idea of triple entry accounting is to have a third entry, thus the triple, which is recorded on a blockchain immutably when there are transactions between parties. So when there's a sale, when there's a purchase, when there's a quotation, when there's an agreement, anything, there's a record that is in the kept in the blockchain, so that neither party after the agreement can then fiddle it. And that means that the need for third parties like auditors and banks is much reduced. When companies, when they're audited, not only a fraction of the transactions are ever looked at by the auditors, because typically in any company of any size, the transactions are far too many for an auditor to look at every single one. And they can't get confirmation from the other party anyway that it's correct. Auditors send out requests to the other party saying, do you agree that you ordered this from this company or that you paid this company? Only a fraction bother to reply. Only a fraction are questioned in the first place. So it's very loose. So an audit currently is a painful process, which is actually pretty useless. Time again, major frauds are missed by auditors. We see instances of accounting companies being fined, large fines, millions of dollars or millions of pounds for failed audits. But auditors come back and say, oh, it's not our business to detect fraud. It's our business to say the accounts are done properly, not that there's fraud. And the general public says, what's the use of that then? If I'm investing in a company, I'd like to know that there isn't fraud going on. And that's part of what I expect auditors to tell me. But the auditors know they can't guarantee it. So they try to wriggle out of it and say it's not actually our job. So triple entry accounting with the immutable entry would permit all entries to be audited. And because of the fact that these entries could be audited and couldn't be changed afterwards, the number of fraudulent ones would be much reduced anyway. Now, in the introduction, Dennis, you said eliminate fraud. I don't go as far as to say it will eliminate fraud. It makes fraud much more difficult to perpetuate. If two companies wanted to get in on the act and they both agreed on the fraud could still go through with triple entry accounting, but then it would require both companies to be involved. So it makes it much more difficult. And in terms of cybercrime, things happening more quickly than the mere fact of it being the immutable record between the parties will put people off from even trying it. So the difficulty... one of the difficulties that we have faced in getting this going is, of course, triple entry accounting is useless when there's one company doing it. It's the old networking effect, like a telephone is useless when there's only one of them. And so getting from zero to scale is the problem. The idea of triple entry accounting even predates blockchain, predates the Bitcoin white paper, because the idea of it's been talked about since the 1990s, but nobody's been able to make it work. And what even post Bitcoin, people have been talking about it, and there's a conference in Malta later this month on triple entry accounting, but nobody has achieved takeoff. It hasn't taken off anywhere. And so the problem is how to achieve that.
Yes.
And that is, UBI is one possible thing that would achieve scale if we could convince people. But we have to convince enough people to buy into it to begin to scale it. Now, Pacio in our white paper sets out the 9 steps required to achieve this. We have worked out what is required to get there. We haven't done it yet, but we've worked out how to get there. And the University College London, UCL London, is the tertiary institution most involved with triple entry accounting and blockchain technology in the world. And they have credited Pacio with coming up with the first workable plan that could actually work.
Those steps, it's not too late. We can still, I think that this is something that it sounds to me that triple entry is something that eventually must happen. Can you give us a brief overview of these steps that you're talking about towards adoption? And one more thing from me is, if all great for a company's books now, but if I'm an individual worried about privacy in a triple accounting world, how is that sort of a thing addressed? Or is there trade-offs where that's a sort of the price you pay for this reduced fraud, or at least the ability to make it harder?
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Our white paper sets out 9 prerequisites for the universal adoption of triple entry accounting. The one is that there must be this immutable entry, which is shared as part of the records of both entities. Secondly, you must work out how to scale and make networking possible for all parties wanting or likely to transact business. The number of transactions involved are in the trillion for the world accounting system. So we've got to be able to process millions of transactions per second, not what Bitcoin has been doing, or Ether networks, or even L2 networks so far. A way for each party to be identified by a globally unique permanent digital ID. And this is one of the sticking points and one of the issues on privacy that we'll come back to later. So we see prerequisite number 3 is a globally unique permanent digital ID. Then 4, a way for the transactions to be made visible to anybody with a need or right to see them, but to remain private otherwise. So that's a technical challenge and a belief challenge. Then 5, standardization of data or data description so that the purpose or meaning of a particular item of data is clear to all interested parties. Now that goes back to my work with double entry accounting and financial statements in general. And there's a current world standard for business transactions called XBRL. But XBRL is a monster and not really a universal standard. So one of the things, as I see, for getting TEA adopted universally is to replace XBRL with something new in the blockchain TEA world that really does the job, so that when one company talks about buying something, that the other it means the same thing on the other side, and it means the same thing to anybody who's looking at the records, so that we don't commit fraud by deception, by mislabeling things or confusing the issue by calling things different names. Then 6 is compliance with financial regulations. 7 is transitional facilities for entries entities using TEA to work with entities which have not yet adopted TEA, DEA. There has to be a transition when some people are using one and some are using the other. And affordability, so that all people can use it, even the smallest micro businesses. And that's one thing where the low cost of transactions on blockchain is beneficial. We're talking about 1 cent type cost per transaction to make it affordable to everybody. And then 9, ease of use, so that everybody can use it without becoming an accountant or be out having to even use fancy accounting packages. Make it simple. So that's as we see it, the 9 prerequisites that have to be met that so far nobody has met, but which we have worked out how to meet. And then in our white paper, we set out how we're going to go about meeting all 9 of those prerequisites. Yes, to come back to your point about privacy, triple entry accounting cannot be without digital ID. And that means that some people, including some Bitcoin maximalists, do not like the idea. They see it as an infringement on privacy. Our view is that in a double entry accounting world, in a business world, the transactions were visible. The difference here is that they're not fraudulent. But as part of that, you must be able to uniquely identify who initiated the transaction and who received it. Digital ID is essential. Now, we realize that's a philosophical argument we will have with some people, and we won't always win it. But yes, we think that the benefit exceeds the cost. But it does mean that the digital identity system must be good and universal. And that is one of the other stumbling blocks to scaling triple entry accounting, to getting to that point. So we actually, Ken and I and others in Pacio, have given much thought to this question. And Ken has actually been our researcher on matters concerning digital ID. And as we all know, there are hundreds of digital ID systems in the world. So there's not much chance of any one of them becoming universal. In our original hubris, back when we had our seed money, we thought we'd create the universal ID. Well, we've learned a bit and there's no chance of achieving that. Like Sam Altman with WorldCoin, or as it's now World, isn't going to achieve it either. India has done well with their system, but that applies only in India, though the technology is available to others. And unfortunately, India is starting to mess it up as well. Various institutions in India are creating yet more digital IDs, even when they've got a universal one was in India already. So back to this hubris, people wanting to do things their way. And okay, we're guilty of that too, but we've had our head kicked in enough to think that we've got to work with everybody, not try and invent it ourselves. So our idea of how to get to a universal ID was to have a system that embodied every other system that had any scale in the world and worked with them all, and to provide a system. So that's now in our white paper as our idea about how to do that. But again, that and the details of triple entry accounting, which blockchain we work with and which scaling technology we work with, are all subject to change up to the moment of starting to scale, depending on the real world activity.
David, good question, sir.
Yeah, I do. Hi, David. How you doing?
Hi.
I hope Saint Lucia is treating you well, sir.
Oh, I've been here 8 years. I'm still here, so it must
very
be.
good. Very good. My question is that I have a lot of friends that are accountants, and one of their primary concerns with regards to adopting blockchain and triple entry accounting is that they want the ability to be able to change things as needed based on whatever transactions or whatever they were doing at the time. I understand that a blockchain is immutable, as you say, that can't be changed. But does it allow for maybe an additional record that has a more revised version of a contract, let's say? And how do you know that revised version is the most up-to-date version or the version that matters?
Right. Yes, adjustments can be made to records by, in the accounting terminology of journals, when you post a journal to adjust something you've done before. In triple entry accounting, it is enforced that you can't edit the original, you must change it with a journal entry that when the record is there. So the same with any contract or agreement. If you edit it, then the new one is there and the trail from A to B is there. You can see it. But yes, accountants must get out of this idea that they change things. They can post adjustments. Now, triple entry accounting doesn't remove a lot of double entry accounting that is internal to an organization. Entries within a company for amortization, depreciation, and the like are internal to the company. They don't involve any other party. So there's no triple entry involved with them. So accountants still have the realm of judgment involved in how much we're going to amortize, how much we're going to depreciate things at, how much we can have to write off our technology, how much we can capitalize it. Many fudges in accounting in the past have been with capitalizing things that shouldn't have been capitalized, Enron being a classic example, one of the biggest frauds ever. But those transactions are still within the realm of the accountant or the financial controller within the company. The thing that if the auditor doesn't have to spend so much time and effort on trying to check for inter-party transactions between companies, then the auditor has more time to devote to the internal transactions and judgment calls. Are we capitalizing correctly? Are we depreciating correctly? And so that hopefully the quality of audits would improve whilst the cost of them declines. But also my point to accountants is the fundamental or the tedium of accounting will disappear. And some accountants worry that's going to see them out of a job. My view is that an accountant worth his or her salt will not view it that way. It means that they have more time to be devoted to improving the business. They're working on things that matter to the business as to how to improve the profitability of the business. One of our co-founders, or one of my co-founders who died last December, but was involved with many years of productivity measurements within businesses and including a ratio called TARI, he found enormous improvements in productivity came about as a result of the accountants looking at the right things instead of chasing the 1 cent that the debits didn't equal the credits by. And the productivity is in fact quite difficult to measure. There's lots of key business indicators and lots of apps and software around, most of which are pretty useless. But if you do in fact measure the right things, the productivity improvement and the improvement of the company's bottom line can be huge. Keith found improvements of up to 80% in profitability of companies and rescued companies from bankruptcy. And the amazing thing about his very simple stuff is that it worked with small businesses as well as big ones. So there is lots of opportunity for accountants to be working in productive areas, helping business and helping people rather than chasing the nitty-gritty to little benefit.
And there's really useful intermediary steps like the ID that folks are working on right now. And I think as well, from the Caribbean's perspective, we are able to become this test bed for a more fraud resistant or resilient economy. I think that's going to be a great thing to attract investment into this region as well. So we're certainly on your side and wishing you all the luck with what you're doing. And everybody here, thank you for showing up. And then, by the way, we didn't send out the email reminder, so I know a few of you came in later. Look out on the website for the recap, and we'll make sure that we get that out ahead of time to you the next time around. But thank you so much, David. And everybody else, thank you for showing up for each other today.
Pleasure being here. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you.